make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. And I've got the wrong one up. Maxwell went to prison for nothing because the Epstein list apparently doesn't exist. There are no victims and everything's fine. Or there are victims, but Epstein killed himself and there's no evidence to prosecute anybody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'll look at that. We'll start there today because it's pretty wild stuff. And we're supposed to accept the Diddy Maxwell thing. Absolutely no questions asked. And embrace the new religion of climate change at the same time. Pretty crazy stuff. The EU wants to reduce emissions by 90% by 2040. Remember, you are the carbon they want to reduce. Canada is working on the hate angle to limit speech. EU is just working on brute strength. They just want to create regulations to end free speech because they don't have any pesky laws that prevent that, I guess. Even though our laws are based on their laws, which have all of that baked in. Magna Carta, et cetera, has that baked in, but it's not explicitly stated in the updated versions, I guess. I'm not sure exactly why they don't have free speech in their laws, but the United States and Canada are unique in that way. And the EU is just bludgeoning forward, and that's about it. So it's interesting to see Canada coming up with definitions of hate to cover everything. And so if you say anything, they can basically charge you if they don't like you, right? And that's where we're heading, I think. 4 in 10 want to leave Canada, and I think that stat's probably low. I think it's way low. Travis Darhanji, I'm probably getting his name wrong, and his emails. So he quit the CBC, and now he's burning all of his bridges to the ground, and he's doing it very publicly. And so we're going to look at that. And an update on the story in the Toronto Star yesterday about the de facto concealed carry. It's according to Runkle the Bailey, Ian Runkle, it is not accurate that this is precedent setting. It's not accurate that the kid's even free on this. Apparently he's still in custody, but I'll tell you that when we get to the tab, because it's interesting. And I thought, it's good to have a real lawyer weigh in on this. And apparently he's very upset at everybody's take on this whole thing. But the Toronto Star printed it. So if the Toronto Star is printing it and not fact-checking their stuff, that's on the Toronto Star, not the influencers who are reporting it. Anyway, regardless, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Danielle Smith and Doug Ford are in Calgary. And this is a preview for later. We'll start with the Epstein list, as I said. Starting off, this is going back in time to Piers Morgan and Elena Hibba, who's President Trump's one of his advisors and a lawyer. And she's talking about how disturbing the Epstein list is. Okay, so this is just remember where we were and to understand where we are now, because where we are now is screwed, absolutely screwed. Here we go.
But in this case, in Epstein's case, it is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
Is it going to be shocking?
I don't see how it's not shocking that there were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret and not been held accountable. Let's talk about the reverse. I believe in accountability. So you have to now go through your process. Now, I won't say they're guilty until they go through their time in court. But again, now it's time for accountability. We have seen for so many years, Pierce, in this country, many investigations, subpoenas, testimonies in Congress, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a general frustration with accountability. We take it halfway, we don't take it home. And I really believe that now with Cash and Pam, there will be accountability. But
she was wrong. Seems like absolutely wrong. Here is Pam. This is the press secretary talking about all of this. And yesterday I was waiting for the confirmation. And so the question was asked during the press briefing. And here it is, the exchange about what's been said. And it looks to me like this is cleanup. This is reframing what has been set up to this point. You heard that we had the lists on our desk. You heard that we were processing the lists. In actuality, we meant all of the paperwork around Epstein, not the Epstein list itself. The Epstein list was a euphemism for all of the paperwork around Epstein. And I think that's bullshit. Anyway, bull poop, whatever it is. Here we go.
Of what happened.
Caroline, the DOJ and FBI have now concluded there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
This administration wants anyone who has ever committed a crime to be held accountable, and I would argue this administration has done more to lock up bad guys than certainly the previous administration. And the Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the President's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Follow up on that,
Sure.
Caroline. Okay, so the FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network, on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
Do you see the liberal tap dance on display? So I often say liberals don't answer questions they don't like. They pivot to questions they do like. And that's true of every politician. Every politician will answer the question they want to answer instead of the question asked of them. And in this case, she's asked, hey, you guys said that the Jeffrey Epstein list was on your desk. How come we can't have it? And she says, our Attorney General is prosecuting bad guys. Have you heard of summer heat wave? It's like, yeah, but you heard the Epstein part of the question, right? And I didn't ask about whatever you're talking about here. Sure, they're trying to put, quote, bad guys in jail, but not the bad guy who you promised to put in jail. Isn't that weird? Isn't that super strange, right? Like Maxwell's in jail for nothing then? So, I mean, she didn't do anything. If Jeffrey Epstein there's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein did anything. What's Maxwell in jail for? Questions. I have questions, and people don't like when I have questions, apparently. Here's the old man. He says, I can't believe Jeffrey Epstein killed himself right before he was about to be acquitted due to a complete lack of evidence. Womp womp, right? Like, oh man, can you believe that? What a coincidence, right? Here's Elon Musk talking about the Epstein files, and looking at this now, the performance of it all seems obvious. You know what I'm saying? Even in the Hibba clip or the Habba clip, what's her name? The first clip I showed, he asked, will it be shocking? And she stands there for a minute and it's like, hit your mark, hit your mark, hit your mark, right? And that's all I can think when I'm watching this on this Elon Musk clip too. Here we go.
I mean, they've put like whatever, 500 or 600 January 6 protesters in prison, and not one person on the Epstein client list.
Will that ever come out, do you think?
You know, I think part of why Kamala's getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
Yes.
And some of those billionaires behind Kamala are terrified of that outcome.
Yeah. Do you think Reid Hoffman's uncomfortable?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gates.
And Gates.
Yeah.
Guess not, though, because nothing's happened. And I guess Epstein didn't do nothing. So, And Elon Musk noticed yesterday, 4 o'clock in the morning, he says, what time is it? Oh, look, it's no one has been arrested o'clock again, right? The official Jeffrey Epstein pedophile arrest counter. Zip. zero, zilch, none, right? But that Maxwell did some bad stuff. Here's Russell Brand talking about this, and they're just pointing out it's interesting that both Diddy and Epstein cases, he says, were resolved within a week of each other, concluding with no wrongdoing officially found. Could Diddy have made a backdoor deal to keep quiet? Seems likely. Could a similar deal have been struck to keep the Epstein list under wraps? Also likely, because if there truly is no list, then Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for trafficking minors to nobody at all. Huh. Not weird? Super duper weird. Super weird. Bruce Parney is responding to Tom Mazzaro, and this is just kind of related in a way that I think explains it maybe a little bit. And Tom is saying this is who really runs the United Kingdom, according to ex-Prime Minister Liz Truss, and it's a group of shadowy people over top of the Prime Minister. She was the Prime Minister and she couldn't get anything done. And she says, because I wasn't running things, clearly. Like if I was running things, I would have been able to get things done, but I couldn't. And the reason is this. And Bruce Party says, this is a quote of Liz Truss's, the problem is not just that these leaders and politicians are incompetent. Even at the top, you can't actually pull the levers. Something drastic needs to change. The state doesn't work. And I've said multiple times that the state apparatus doesn't serve you, doesn't serve me, doesn't serve the citizen. It serves their masters. And their masters are the people who get them elected, the people who give them money, and not the people who pay their salaries with taxes. No. The people who give them money for their re-election campaign, right? The people who have all sorts of Chinese money or foreign money or whatever. And they come in and no questions asked and no details given, but unending money, unending support. And oh, look, there's a bus of supporters who are showing up and they all seem to be students from the University of Waterloo. Huh, isn't that weird? Super weird. But nobody ever gets in trouble, right? Han Dong didn't even get in trouble. Nobody cares. So why would they stop? Why would they stop? So the state doesn't work because the state works for the people who are paying for it. And the people who are paying for it are doing it openly. And we should have checks and balances. But I guess they don't work. And it's our responsibility to fix it. And sometimes no action is an action. If you don't do something, then that leaves space for other people to do something. And so, as I said, it's no wonder that they're going to continue doing what they're doing. Everywhere, because everywhere is infiltrated. How about the CBC? Yes, the CBC. The EU is going after speech in a very direct way, a very direct confrontational way. They're just saying, we're going to outlaw speech and you don't have any legal recourse. We're just going to outlaw it because it's mean. We don't like it and we don't like you, and that's that. And they're pretty well going to do that, it seems. They're on the path for that. And in Canada, they have to come up with different ways to limit speech, and we're going to different excuses to limit speech, and we're going to look at that through this series of tabs here. But first, we have to, anybody who talks about this stuff, and I've recently got my YouTube channel back, and that's interesting. I think it's a trap. I think they're letting us back in because they want to be able to say, here's what you said, and 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 I don't know why it's important that they give us access to YouTube. I've heard as well that the Department of Justice or some department in the United States was getting set to sue YouTube for their practices of banning people. And so YouTube started scrambling and unbanning people. But I don't know what's true within all of that. But their control of speech is going to come down to laws where you've contravened a law and they're going to try and intimidate you with fines, with all sorts of stuff. They've tipped their hand with the Online Safety Act, right? With third-party people who are, quote, harmed can charge you $70,000 or something like that, with $50,000 going to them and $20,000 going to the government? Or is it $50,000 to the government and $20,000 to them? I don't know. But can you imagine? You could have a $150,000 salary because you're offended by something I said 3 times, right? And I'd have to pay it to you. Nope. Like that's completely crazy. That's absolutely crazy. But people will try it. Anyway, CBC is getting rid of people who rock the boat. Travis is somebody apparently who rocked the boat. Bradshaw says, big shocker, liberal state media didn't want conservative voices heard. Hey, Mark Carney, this is another way to save money, defund the CBC. Mark Carney's running an illegitimate government. He's not going to fix anything. He represents the bad guys. The bad guys are in charge, and Mark Carney's in charge of them. And I don't think that him being parachuted into the prime ministership and having a rigged election is a good recipe for us saying, hey, please, Mark Carney, fix Canada, because he doesn't give a shit. He's doing what his bosses are telling him to do, which is to continue destroying Canada economically in the way that they have been destroying us for the last 10 years, continuing the invasion, continuing the decline of services, all of the things that have been happening destroying our economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The spraying in the skies. All of these things are part and parcel of the plan continuing, and Mark Carney represents that. And if somebody like me walked in, well, they'd do to me what they did to Liz Truss, right? And Liz Truss was on side. She was ready to do what she was told for the most part, but then I guess she went rogue and she was gone very quickly. But it's one of those things where they don't work for us, and they haven't worked for us for a long time. And thinking that they do is part of us being kept in the dark. We're not playing the right game. We're not holding the right people accountable. And so they can continue to get away with it while we pretend that what we're doing matters, because it doesn't. Our game doesn't impact their game. And that's unfortunate. Anyway, National Post is reporting Travis's lawyer, Catherine Marshall, said Monday that the CBC didn't want him booking conservative voices on his show. So no Pierre Poilievre, no conservative voices. That's interesting, right? Pierre Poilievre is responding to Brian Lilley. Brian Lilley sharing the letter and everything that Travis released, and we'll get to that in just a sec. Pierre Poilievre says, a veteran host just blew the whistle, question the state-funded broadcaster's narrative, and you get demoted or shut down. This isn't journalism, it's taxpayer-funded groupthink and liberal propaganda. Yeah, I think that that's true. And here is National Post again. Oh yeah, didn't want conservatives on the show. Here is Travis's letter first to the CBC leadership. It says, Dear CBC leadership, this is reprinted. It was a publicly released letter. So he publicly released it. I think he probably sent it to the Toronto Sun to publish. And so this is sent to CBC leadership first, and then CBC coworkers. Dear leadership, this is an involuntary resignation. I'm stepping down not by choice, but because the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has made it impossible for me to continue my work with integrity. After years of service, most recently as the host of Canada Tonight with Travis D., I have been systemically sidelined, retaliated against, and denied the editorial access and institutional support necessary to fulfill my public service role. When I joined CBC, I did so with clear understanding of its mandate and beliefs in its importance to Canadian democracy. I was told I would be, quote, a bold voice in journalism. I took that role seriously. I worked to elevate underrepresented stories, expand political balance, and uphold the journalistic values that Canadians expect from their public broadcaster. But what happened behind the scenes at CBC too often contradicts what's shown to the public. Performative diversity, tokenism, a system designed to elevate certain voices and diminish others. I was repeatedly denied access to key newsmakers. Internal booking and editorial protocols were weaponized to create structural barriers for some while empowering others, particularly a small circle of senior Ottawa-based journalists. When I questioned these imbalances, I was met with silence, resistance, and eventually retaliation. I was fighting for balanced and accused of being on a crusade. My show, which I was initially told was a strategic priority, was rebranded, my name removed, my access curtailed. My medical leave was whispered about in the newsroom. I was presented with an NDA non-disclosure agreement tied to an investigation about a tweet about then-President Catherine Tate. It was designed not to protect privacy, but to sign away my voice. When I refused, I was further marginalized. These were not isolated actions. They were part of a pattern that sent a clear message: fall in line or be removed. I stayed as long as I could, but CBC leadership left me with no reasonable path forward. This has taken a real toll on my health, my career, my trust in the institution I once believed in. Believed I could help reform from within, But the great harm is to the public, a broadcaster that no longer lives up to its mandate, a culture that resists accountability, and a system that punishes those who dare to challenge it. It's why the CBC is losing trust with Canadians and its audience. This is in bold. My departure is not the end of this story. There is more to come, and it will be shared when the time is right. You have taken away my job, but you cannot and will not silence my voice. Sincerely, Travis. And then here's the letter to the colleagues. I haven't actually read this one. I tagged it. I read the first one, and then I forgot to read this one. So we're reading it together for the first time. Dear colleagues, after more than 20 years in Canadian television journalism, I've been forced to resign from CBC News. This was not a voluntary decision. It comes after trying to navigate a workplace culture defined by retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm, a place where asking hard questions about tokenism, masquerading as diversity, problematic political coverage protocols, and the erosion of editorial independence became a career-ending move. I was one of the CBC's most visible journalists, a senior parliamentary correspondent, co-host of Marketplace, and most recently the host of Canada Tonight, promoted as a symbol of progress until I began questioning the gap between CBC's stated values and its internal reality. When I pushed for honest conversations about systemic issues and editorial imbalance, I was shut out, sidelined, silenced, and ultimately erased. CBC calls itself a champion of inclusion and public trust, but those ideals are too often deployed as branding tools, not lived principles, and Canadians are noticing. What's happening inside this institution is no longer just an internal problem, it's a public one. The erosion of trust in the CBC didn't happen overnight. It's the result of years of dysfunction at the highest levels, where a small group of insiders on air and in management wields outsized influence, prioritizes spin over substance. Leadership clings to reputation while failing to confront the real reason viewership is in freefall. CBC doesn't need more workshops. It needs accountability. It needs reform. It needs courage. To those, I'll do it. Give me CBC. I'll do it. I would make it great again. I don't know what's coming next, says Travis, but I know there will be efforts to discredit me, spin, smears, the usual playbook. But I'm not here to protect comfort. I'm here to speak truth, even if I have to do it from the outside. To those who stood by me, thank you. I'll miss the good people I worked with, many of whom are still trying to do journalism and the public deserves under impossible conditions. I leave with clarity and my voice intact. You will hear more from me soon. And so that's very interesting as well. Here is Travis again on his personal account, and he says, click here to read a note directly from me. And so this is just a short one, and we'll read it as well. He says, they tried to crush me. I'm still standing. By now, many of you know I'm no longer at CBC. What you may not know is that what it cost me and why I had no real choice but to walk away. After more than 20 years in broadcast journalism, this wasn't a move I ever imagined making. I spent years in small markets and local stations working my way to the top, my own national primetime program. But when you speak up inside a system that rewards silence, when you speak truth to power, the consequences come fast and they come hard. Yeah. My career, my livelihood, all gone. This experience nearly broke me, but I'm still here and I'm not backing down. I still have my voice and I intend to use it because this isn't just about me. It's about trust in CBC, a public institution that's supposed to serve you. It's about voices being sidelined, hard truths avoided, and the public being left in the dark about what's really happening inside the national broadcaster. I have no doubt that there will be efforts to discredit me, to paint me as bitter or disgruntled. That's what happens when you challenge power. If you believe Canadians deserve answers and transparency from the institutions they fund, leave your email below. When the time is right, I'll pull the curtain back. I'll share everything. I'll tell you what's really happening inside the walls of your CBC. Thanks from the bottom of my heart. Your continued support means the world to me. I sent him an email saying, hey, you want to come on my show? We could talk about it. And I haven't heard back yet. So we'll see. I'll let you know if that works. Here is Blender News, and these guys are going through the global censorship of the EU. The EU, as I've said a couple of times, is coming in like a bulldozer, and they're just saying, you like free speech? That's pretty that's pretty terrorist of you. That's pretty dangerous of you, right? And so here's what they're doing in this breakdown. So here it is very quick.
The European Union has officially enshrined censorship into law under the Digital Services Act. Started as a voluntary code of practice on disinformation, is now mandatory for big tech. As of July 1st, Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Microsoft, Spotify, and every other platform deemed a very large online platform or very large online search engine must now prove to the European Commission that they're actively policing so-called disinformation. And they don't just have to comply. They have to report, document, and open themselves up to audits by the EU regulators. If they don't, they face fines up to 20% of their global revenue. Again, that's revenue, not profit. So just for fun, let's do some math. Meta generated $164 billion in revenue in 2024, which means a fine under this act would cost them $33 billion. It would cost TikTok $34 billion. As for Google, we're talking $70 billion for a single infraction. That's not guidance, that's a shakedown. But let's ask the only question that really matters. Who decides what qualifies as disinformation? Because that's the ballgame here. Is it a government bureaucrat in Brussels who gets to decide what truth looks like because they know better? Is it some NGO funded by political interests telling Meta what is misinformation? Is it another fact checker funded by Big Pharma who conveniently labels legitimate data or inconvenient stories as missing context whenever the facts don't fit the narrative?
Yes. Yes. So obviously that's a problem. There's a little bit more to that video. You should check that out. And link is in the description. Wiretap Media says, despite the rise of shootings and stabbings and murders and drug zombies in the province, British Columbia decides to invest money into hate crimes. And they even got a Rogers Wireless Indian telemarketer who you can barely understand to break the story. So, yep, and yep. Check. Here we go.
Amid a significant rise in hate crime.
The point here is they've redefined what hate crimes are. And the hate crimes have risen because of the redefinition. And now they're saying, we've got to get resources to tackle this massive rise in hate crimes. But it's artificial. They've done this on purpose. It's like COVID, but with hate crimes.
crimes, BC has rolled out a plan to tackle the problem and improve public safety. Sarab Sandhu reports.
5 additional police officers and 1 intelligence analyst will join the BCRCMP's hate crimes unit to deal with a rise of hate crimes across the province. Provincial data shows police reported hate crimes in BC rose by 23% between 2022 and 2023. Hate crimes motivated by race or ethnicity increased by 12%, while those
12 whole percent. Holy smoke. You know, the only way to battle this, import more people from the Middle East and raise taxes. That's the only solution that our government ever entertains. So that's it. That's all they're going to do. Here's another very concerning thing. Rupa is highlighting this whole thing. Amira Al-Gawabi is saying that she had a productive meeting with Prime Minister Carney to introduce him to the work of the office. Any prime minister who works for the people would fire this woman, would remove the office entirely, fire the anti-Semitic people, the whole thing, gone. See you later. And that is important because this gives everybody who follows this religion a separate classification, right? And then if you have people who are representing other groups, that gives them a separate classification. And then the people that don't have any representation are left out. No lobbying for us, right? And so this is inappropriate. This is not okay. And yet we pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, $150,000, $250,000. I don't even know what her salary is, in order to lobby on behalf of a specific religious group of people in Canada. Why? I don't know. But any prime minister worth their salt would immediately end those offices. Immediately. All done, wound up. Like yesterday, at noon today, nobody's getting paid. So you might as well all leave. I don't care. I'll hire movers to clean out your offices. It's all done. Done. That's that. See you later. Stroke of the pen. Done. But we don't have that. So Amira Al-Gawabi is meeting with the Prime Minister. Mark Carney says, an important meeting with Special Representative Al-Gawabi. Canada's new government is fighting the rise in Islamophobia and hate. This is going to be used as a justification to shut down free speech. They're going to say, that's very Islamophobic of you. I can't believe you'd say something like that. How could you shut down the Al-Gawabi's office? That's hatred in YouTube form or whatever. And it's bullshit. That's bullshit. Like, that is not hatred. That is criticism of a government wasting taxpayer dollars to kowtow to, pander to religious group within Canada. That is not disinformation, hate, or misinformation, but they'll brand it as such, and they will crush anybody who says stuff like this. Honestly, this is somebody in the chat said slow creep to 1984. That actually might be the title of today's show. So pretty wild stuff, right? Rupa is responding. She says, it's incredible how Muslims in Canada get recognized for facing Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism. What about everyone else in multicultural Canada? We're not being represented. Rupa continues. She says, terms like anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism are already in schools, with boards adopting the Arab Canadian lawyer's definition. In December, current Immigration Minister Lena pushed for federal recognition of APR. Mark Carney, my words. Ooh, I like that. This is going to be the next big thing. Yeah, this is going to be used as the excuse to crack down on free speech. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. Here's Danielle Smith. Doug Ford was hanging out with Danielle Smith, and they were talking pipelines, and it's never going to happen. But just like MTG, I was watching Off Grid with Doug and Stacey, and I like them. They're kind of fun. Although they like to push products a lot. And I was like, dude, you gotta lay off that a bit. But his information is very interesting. And he was saying that MTG is not going to stop the spraying in the skies because it's above her head. It's DARPA and these other military things that they're doing it, and MTG can't stop it. And I feel like this is the same argument here. Like, these guys may mean well, they may even try, but they're not the real levers of power. They're not the ones who are actually calling the shots. They're the representative. They go to the people who tell them what to do, and they say, could we please turn off the spraying? People are getting real upset about it. And they say, sure, go have a talk about pipelines and flip some pancakes, you idiots. And that's what happens. And so that's where we're at. So Doug Ford was flipping pancakes with Pierre Poilievre and Danielle Smith and Scott Moe. And we had a whole bunch of conservative pancakes being made and nothing getting done, right? No pipelines, just pancakes. Oh, that's another title I could use. Here is Doug Ford saying, you know what we need? Pipelines.
No one will build a pipeline to Tidewaters if there's a ban on tankers. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard, a ban on tankers. No one will invest in opening a mine if it takes 15 years to get it to yes. It's time to end excuses, and it's time to start building, and we need to start building now. No one will build a pipeline to Tidewaters.
Do you think that Doug Ford talking tough is going to get it done? Caroline Mulrooney says, in the face of U.S. tariffs and economic uncertainty, Ontario is working with Alberta to build new pipelines, rail lines, and other energy and trade infrastructure. Learn more about our plan to build a more competitive, more resilient, and more self-reliant economy. So I'll believe it when I see it, basically. Bjorn says the EU's 90% climate cut by 2040 won't happen. So here's the EU saying, today we're proposing to reduce the EU's emissions by 90% by 2040. This is a significant milestone on our road to net zero by 2050. So that's not going to happen. And I agree. I think Bjorn's right. But at the same time, I think that like Cuba happened, right? And people went to Cuba in the 80s and 90s and saw cars from the 50s because their economy was kind of stagnating. And if the people who are in charge here get their way, people with old gas-powered vehicles either won't be able to afford to replace them, so they'll keep them on the road with mechanics and doing work on them, or we'll have this nightmare of electric cars and not enough, and it'll be transit everywhere, electric transit, and that'll be a nightmare in and of itself. So I'm not saying that it'll never happen, that we won't try. I'm just saying that it won't work. And I think that it will fail, and then hopefully people go back to gas-powered cars, but at this point, that's not even a dead cert. Maybe we'll go to bicycles because people will have forgotten what life is like now, or even 10 years ago. So anyway, either the EU fudges the stats or the costs will rise so fast and high that most governments will be voted out, except the elections are rigged. So voted out. That was supposed to happen just this last election, and oh, shucks darn, didn't, right? The rest of the world will sail past the EU laughing. That's the plan, isn't it? Russia, China. The actual climate impact will be trivial. Yes. I think obviously, yes. So very concerning things happening there. And we're into our grab bag of governance and the second half of the show now. So we're going to kill the stream in a minute, but I want to do this one first. Kirk says Canada has an existential crisis. It's normal for nearly half of a country's future generation to want to abandon its country in favor of another, right? No. So apparently 4 in 10 Canadians aged 18 to 34 would vote to become an American if citizenship and conversion of assets to US dollars is guaranteed. So, I mean, I think your house value would go down. I think automatically the house values would drop in Canada over like the next 6 months. I think it would readjust. I think that would happen if we became American citizens. And so like, yes, your house would be worth however much your house would be worth, but it would be worth less, but it would be US dollars being used to trade for it. Does that make sense? But I think you'd lose more value than the conversion. So I don't know that you'd be gaining anything in the big area, right? But like a chocolate bar is still going to cost what a chocolate bar costs, just it'll switch over to USD. I think the number 4 in 10, 43% is low. I think it's way low. I think it's probably closer to 7. And I think that if it was in writing, if people were voting on a real thing that's happening, I think that it would firm up, and I think that a lot of people would support it. All of that said, I don't think it would ever get through. If Canadians had anything to do with the votes, I don't think it'll ever get through. But having 40%, 50% of the population want to leave the country, that's shockingly high. That's unbelievably high. You shouldn't have people in that age bracket feeling so hopeless that they want to leave the country. That's crazy. And I mean, I understand why. I don't even disparage them. I'm looking for jobs in the United States too, because just for interest's sake, because 50 acres in a rural state with a moat sounds much better than 50 acres in Alberta with a moat, because the federal government is so dang crazy here, right? Like, I'm not trying to run from the fight, because I think the fight's absolutely everywhere. I think that you could be better prepared in the United States, unfortunately, than Canada. But all of that said, I don't think it's realistic. Like, I don't think that I'm realistically going to be uprooting my entire family to pursue that in the next year or two. I hope that we're able to find a solution here. Honestly, genuinely, I do. And if not finding a solution here, maybe we do get absorbed by the United States. But again, not in the next 2 years, probably not in the next 4 years, but we'll see. I mean, Trump seems to want to make it happen, but we'll see. But back to Kirk, he says, this is what happens when our youth's future was replaced and sacrificed for third world immigrants and real estate and a real estate Ponzi scheme. That's the sad truth. Like, our kids didn't need to be so beat down. Our kids didn't need to be so demoralized. And yet, here we are, and the powers that be seem very comfortable with the choices they've made. And again, they don't work for us. They work for the people above them. They have bosses, and the bosses who run things, they seem very happy with how things are going. So the elected officials who don't work for us are making their bosses very happy with what they're doing, but the citizens don't like it.